Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to IAB Europe's guest webinar today with IAB Tech Lab. We're very delighted to have everyone join us live. My name is Helen Muzzard, and I'm the Marketing and Industry Strategy Director for IAB Europe. Today's webinar, we will be looking at how Apple's IDFA and other ID changes could impact our industry and what you can do to prepare. So with that, I'm going to pass you over to our host today, Oliver von Wersch, and he is representing IAB Tech Lab in Europe. So we'll run through the agenda and show you the fantastic lineup of speakers that we have to cover today's subject. Just before I pass over, because we're live, we love audience questions because you're all here. So if you do have any questions that you would like Oliver to put to the panel at the end of the session, you'll see at the very bottom of the interface there's a Q&A box, so you can place your questions in there. Thank you very much. And over to you, Oliver.
Thank you, Helen. So very warm welcome also from me to this joint webinar session from IAB Europe and IAB Tech Lab. This is going to be interesting because we'll be trying to cover as many aspects of the Apple IDFA and SKAdnetwork situation, which we now have in front of us, or actually which has been announced, as possible. So that is probably a multi-dimensional webinar here, covering technology aspects as well as elaborating a bit on the industry impacts and also on public policy impacts, which the Apple decision might have. As mentioned, feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will try to cover them as interactively as possible and with the audience given. But we also have a very interesting panel to cover as much as we can of the current situation. If you can turn to the next slide, Helen, thanks. So this is the brief agenda. We start with the technology part. So Amit Shetty, Senior Director of Product from IAB Tech Lab, will take over in a minute and elaborate a bit on SKAdnetwork. IAB Tech Lab has been running a sub-working group on, especially on SKAdnetwork, and how this set of tools or this API can be utilized for things in the means of measurement. So this is about technology, the first portion, what companies can do actually to react on the foreseeable situation that IDFAs will only be available through opt-in, which Apple announced. That is one aspect of our discussion. The second aspect of our discussion is a bit broader. Nicholas from IAB France and in his day job working for Criteo in France will show this broader perspective to us in a very short impulse. It is about market control. It will be a bit about also antitrust issues which might be there in the context which Apple has put here, and we will then try to discuss all this in a panel with again Nicolas, but also Thomas Mandrina, Senior Director Publisher Xander, and Carlo Cielinski, CEO of Apple Group. I will give you a bit more information about my panelists a bit later on. So, but we start with Amit. Hopefully the screen takeover can take place now with a technology related speech. How is the IAB Tech Lab perspective on IDFA? What about the SKAdnetwork, and what other activities are there, and what other options are there which industry participants can take on this? So Amit, yeah, good morning once again. We see each other the second time today. Great to have you here. Over to you. The floor is yours.
Sounds good. Thank you, Oliver. And let me share my screen. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. And thank you for IAB Europe for giving me the opportunity to speak here. So I'm going to be providing a quick update on, I'll start off with the actual iOS updates that are relevant to us, and then walk us through some of the Tech Lab initiatives that are related to these updates, and end up with any questions you may have. So the iOS 14 updates, these are the 5 areas that I think are the most relevant to this group. The changes to the IDFA and the usage of the IDFA. There's an App Store privacy transparency detail. And then there are some app install attribution updates that they've provided. And 2 other things, and those are the 3 that I'll be focusing on today. But there are also 2 other things which are relevant, I think, and that's the precise geolocation and who gets to use that, as well as some privacy reports around the tracking companies and so on. So those are the areas that I would definitely recommend everyone to take a look at, even after this call. So the first area is the IDFA and the App Store privacy transparency. So on the IDFA front, there's a new pop-up that includes an authorization, and that would be provided to users asking for the permission to track users. Now, the interesting point over here is that this is not going to be enforced right now, as I'm sure all of you are aware. It's something that Apple plans to enforce. They said early Q1, early 2021. I don't know when exactly that would really end up being, but I think we should assume that it could be as early as Q1 of next year. And so start preparing accordingly. And also, I'm aware that there are other conversations going on with Apple around all these topics. So timelines-wise, I think we should all be aware that things might be a little bit in flux. The second part is the authorization status associated with the IDFA. It basically means a little more detail around around the IDFA and the usage of the IDFA. And then finally, I think the concept of the IDFV, the identifier for vendors, is also something that's getting a little more highlighted. Basically, this is an ID that can be used across all apps for a given vendor. And the other part is a privacy notice or a nutrition label that reminds me a lot of the data label that we have, but basically kind of gives a little bit of more information about what kind of privacy and other access details for any given app, and expose that to the user. And then probably the most interesting part for that I've been working on, at least, has been the SKAdnetwork API. Basically, they have provided, and this is basically all around app install attribution, right? So it means that they basically provide a concept of a SKAdnetwork ID and provide a workflow on how it should be used. So the idea is that you have these concepts of ad networks that need to have an ID associated with them, and use those for campaigns. And then when you have a ad for an app, in this example that they provided, app B, and the user clicks and actually installs it, they pass that information along, and when app B launches, they're now able to register with that ID and pass that along for postback and to verify that so that they can get attribution. But of course, there's not a individual specific impression level attribution. It's aggregated and anonymized longer term attribution. So that's where the timer comes into play as well. So that's the overall picture. I just put in some takes across the industry that I've seen. I think in general, people do feel that it's good to see the emphasis on user privacy. That's always a good thing to keep in mind. There's also, at the same time, there's also a lot of worry about the end of the IDFA and attribution as we know it on iOS, right? And that is actually a very real thing to think about. People have talked about doing workarounds using their own IDs and such, but that's unlikely to work at this point, at least, given the guidance that Apple has provided, saying that, hey, if a user says no, then you should not be using any other IDs as well. A lot of conversations around contextual targeting have I think, been popping up a lot more, and having to do basically. I think that's one of those areas that is going to gain a lot more traction, especially on iOS. And then, of course, probably the big one is consent fatigue, right? So you have a lot of different consent frameworks and concepts. You have GDPR to think about. You have the transparency consent framework that you should be working with, and really, I think this is a key part which people are thinking about a lot. That Apple has been working separately from the industry efforts around this, and that's something that I think everyone would love to address. And it really comes down to having proprietary implementations is always going to be challenging. And then, of course, an iOS-specific implementation extension is what is required to support even the other the features that they have around SKAdnetworks and such. But I'll be covering that. Anyway, so that's the kind of a quick rundown of what I've been hearing across the industry. From a tech lab point of view, there are probably three areas that are most relevant over here. The most direct one is obviously and that's the one that I'll be focusing on the most today, is the updates to OpenRTB in order to support IDFA, IDFA, and the SKAdnetworks feature. That's the extension that we've been working on, and I'll cover that in more detail in a second. Project Rearc, I think, is very relevant, if not directly, at least from an overall privacy and attribution point of view, is obviously very relevant. TCF is obviously also relevant because of the idea of having a consent framework that is standardized across all platforms in a consistent manner. Content label, audience taxonomy, data label, all of these are, I listed those out. They kind of, all of these have, I think, crossover between Project Rearc and other efforts, but I think all of these are going to be relevant in the iOS world as we go along. So just wanted to spend a couple of minutes on Project Rearc. I won't be spending too much time on this because I'm sure that everyone has heard about Rearc, but at a minimum, I wanted to highlight that this effort is going on. But basically, it's the idea of supporting privacy by default addressability, right? So with the third-party cookies going away, with things like the IDFA updates with Apple, I think it's important for we believe that it's important for the industry to have a good story around addressability, but with the privacy, user privacy in mind at the same time. So this could be this could take on a whole different range of forms. Could be content contextual targeting based on the content that you're using instead of focusing on users. It could be building up a a cohort of users kind of aggregated together rather than, again, individual users. There are a range of things that are being discussed in that effort, and I highly encourage everyone to join that effort and participate in that. But my focus is going to be on the things that I've been working on with the programmatic working group over the last few months, and really these are the four things that that stand out there. The first is a device, an extension to the OpenRTB device object to support passing the IDFA and the authorization status, which has been updated. The second is an extension to the bid request and the bid response in order to support the SKAdnetwork ID, since that needs to be sent along on the ad request. The third is to provide guidance and tools really for app developers to help build this out. I mean, SKAdnetworks by itself is, while Apple has provided a lot of guidance around how it should be used, the actual workflow that includes all the different ad systems that they need to work with have probably not been thought through in their documentation. So we are providing the additional information that is necessary from an ad tech point of view. And then finally, we have a proposal that we're working through right now to manage the ad network IDs more efficiently. I mean, it's the way it's structured, it's tough to have a list of ad network IDs that the publishers will be interested in maintaining, and how do you really manage the communication of that list in a consistent manner across all the different entities involved. So that's something that we are working through right now. I know this is a bit of an eye chart, and I really don't expect anyone to read through all the details. But basically, these are the and all of this is on the GitHub page that I think I have it on the slide. If I don't, I'll make sure that I have it before we send it out to everyone. But basically, this is on the GitHub page describing the actual extensions that we've built out in order to support these updates. Right, so the first one is, as I mentioned earlier, is the update to the bid request device object to support the more detailed information around the authentication status. The second is the IFE, and we call it IFE to be consistent and not tied completely to Apple. The idea is where we pass the IDFV. And then on the bid request side is where you would have, if you can see my pointer, you can pass the IDs that the publisher supports in the bid request, so that you can, on the response side, you can know whether or not you are going to be able to use your SKAdnetwork ID for attribution. And then on the response side, passing along the specific ID and information about the callbacks and such as part of the response. And the idea being that, as the different entities, I guess, that would be involved, right? So you have the SSP's SDK, the ad SDK that would be a part of the publisher app. You have the SSP server, you have the bidder and such. Basically, if you go back to Apple's picture, this kind of augments that to add in the communication level information outside of Apple's ecosystem, right? So allowing the SSP has to provide information to the to help the publisher build out the P list with their supported ads IDs, so that's part of the app that is built out. But then as the ad request goes out, the SSP would include the IDs that the publisher supports, and then you get back the information from the bid response, that extension that we looked at on the previous page. And then the rest of it basically works as Apple had previously described. So a quick quick overview of the responsibilities of the various participants when it comes to the SKAdnetwork IDs. The SSPs have to, number one, provide the publishers with a list of access to their buying entities with the IDs. And they should ideally provide that in a publicly hosted list. Now, this is also where this is one of those things which is, I'll admit, is a bit in flux, trying to figure out the best workflow that can be used. So we are talking about having a Tech Lab supported hosted list of IDs that makes it easier for publishers to consume, and of course they'll have the option to specify exceptions if they're interested and so on. So it really does depend on the publisher's business model as far as who they work with. So, and the SSPs and SDKs need to support the OpenRDB extension, and of course they should provide the signed ads as part of their support the signed ads as part of their SDK. DSPs and the buying entities need to, number one, make sure that you have a set of SKAdnetwork IDs for every supply partner that you want to be able to tracking app install campaigns around. And then, of course, support the OpenRDB extensions, and finally, of course, return the signed assets to the SDK so that you have a signed ad, and that can be checked by Apple and so on. And I think I'm missing one thing over there, which is the actual callback oh, actually, is there? Then the callback endpoint need to be postback endpoint also needs to be provided. And of course, finally, the publishers who also have to make sure that they have the right set of network IDs on their info.p list. And then, of course, work with the SSPs and SDKs to manage the list and also make sure that they are making the right calls and such. So that's basically the main set of things. We also think that we might have to make sure that there are no regulatory issues with all these workflows. So definitely would love to get feedback on that from that point of view as well. So what can you do right now? I think the first this is of course a little tricky because of timing. We don't really know exactly when all these things are absolutely going to be enforced. I think they're already available and supported, but it's not enforced right now. So what I definitely recommend is getting a SKAdnetwork ID from Apple immediately if you believe that you need to track a campaign and such. Join the programmatic working group working on this extension. Currently, we are working on that shared list that I referred to and how that should work out. We probably will have a flow where we'll have the folks with the SKAdnetwork IDs to come in and register for that to join the list, and then have processes where the SSPs and DSPs can consume that and pass along to the relevant places. And of course, not directly tied to iOS 14, but definitely should join Project Rearc, since that is really the place that we are focusing on all our privacy and attribution work. And then really, I guess, wait to a certain degree to see how things play out. I also do have the links to the blog that we wrote around this, as well as the GitHub extension. So please do take a look at that as well. So that's all I have for today. Oliver, do we want to take questions, or how do we want to go in?
We have a very few questions so far, but I guess it makes sense to take the question at the end. There is one question which only you can answer, and it is directly related to SKAdnetwork. The one question was, can I work with an MMP using SKAdnetwork? Yeah, over to you.
Right. So yes, that's actually one of those areas that is not entirely clear to me. It's and really we really do need to kind of figure out how that would completely play out, because I think the challenge is that you can only have one endpoint that the SKAdnetwork would be registered to. So when you're trying to run a campaign, you want to get the feedback for that campaign. And so I would say it probably depends on how you manage the reporting for your campaign. I would think that MMPs can also register you can register SKAdnetwork through an work with an MMP for that. But I'm not entirely sure how that would play out across the entire ecosystem. So I know that's not a great answer, but it's one of those things with this which we are kind of trying to work through.
Okay, thank you. So there are other questions which we already have, but we will try to cover that later on in the open Q&A and on the panel where possible. Thanks, Amit, for the moment. That's great. Thank you. So now, as mentioned, we will be trying to put different spotlights on the same topic. So the first spotlight was on technology and the options which Apple, so to speak, Apple leaves. Putting IDFA as an opt-in through SKAdnetwork, and what are the technical capabilities and limitations there. Now we have a different spotlight from Nicholas Rieul. Nicholas is president of IAB France and also managing director of Criteo in France. As you might have read, a French-led coalition is actually complaining against Apple in antitrust matters in France. That has been published. And because Apple is setting basically from the perspective of this coalition their own rules, and what implications this has and how this works, and what the background of this development in France, and of course then on a European level as well could be and will be, is presented very shortly as an impulse by Nicolas. Over to you. Hopefully the technology works now.
Thank
Nicolas,
you.
it's your floor.
Thank you, Oliver. I'm going to share my screen as well as Amit. It's gonna work. Okay. And now let's put the full screen, and it should be okay. Please let me know if it's okay. I think it's fine. Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Amit. I think it was a very great presentation and sum up around what's going to happen and the privacy change around the iOS 14. As we know, the nutrition label should come the 8th of December now, and the enforcement of this new pop-up should come early next year. From the information we have, it's probably most likely going in March with the version 14.3 of iOS. Around this space. So it's important for everyone, and that's basically the role of IAB as well, to get everyone help to be prepared, because that's the I hope it's the plan B. That we have to be ready. And now we would love to, I'm going to introduce you what a coalition, a European coalition, have done. Just to give you a chronology of the European coalition have done, and most recently a French coalition of trade organization as well. So as you know, Apple announced this new pop-up, which we feel it's not really a fair move, specifically in European Union, where, as you know, cookie and tracker like IDFA, IDFA, or cookies are required the consent under the e-privacy directive. So and you know how the TCF and all the consent management platform are now are everywhere around apps and websites. So we feel that specifically in European Union, we have a very strict, probably the strictest and protective data protection law in the world, protecting user. And having this new layer, which is not requesting by law, and we feel that it's really influencing people to say no, basically. As you can see here, you have a very binary allow tracking and say please don't track me, and only very small part is customizable to say why we are using this, and you see as it's for personalized ad. So we see it's not really fair in terms for every publisher to say why they are requesting, what are the benefits of this, and what people are doing with the different data, and what kind of partner as well. So there is a real a lack of information here, where the TCF is really good for that. So that was the 25th of June. Following this announcement, a really unique coalition of trade organizations, as you can see, including IAB Tech Lab, IAB Europe, the Publisher Association around Europe as well, sent a letter to Apple, to Tim Cook. So basically to say several things. The first one is that it's not GDPR compliant. So this pop-up is not helping the publisher to be GDPR compliant or compliant to the e-privacy directive when it's come to consent. So in any case, you need a double. That's what Amit was talking about when he was talking about consent fatigue. In any case, you need another pop-up, because there is not information. The consent have to be freely given, but also informed, and there is not enough information. So we basically say it's useless, and it's very helpful, as it's binary, and most of people are most likely going to reject it. And also, if you want to come back and accept later, you have to go in your settings to say yes, which most likely people are not going to do because you can't re-ask later. Worse than that, if you say no, and after you say yes to the consent, which is this one, this pop-up, the TCF pop-up, for example, GDPR compliant, which is required by law, and then you can't override what Apple have inside the device. So it's not customizable, and we feel it was anti-competitive. Why? Because, as you know, Apple is an advertising player right now. They have we think they are important ambition on the advertising, but today what they have is they basically do app promotion. So as a lot of, as you know, app promotion company competing in the market today, Apple is another player, and they are using personalized data. So we send this this letter. We think it's unfair because for their own purpose, as you see on the left is what they are asking to everyone, and for the same purpose, which is using personal data and Identifier to do personalized advertising, Apple, and I invite you, if you have an iPhone, to go on your settings, you will see that you have on iOS 14 something very, on the very top, you have something called tracking, and on the very bottom, you have something called Apple advertising, where you're opt-in by default for personalized ad, and they are using name, address, gender, activities that you are doing on your iPhone to do targeting ads. So we feel it's unfair, and they should apply the same standard to themselves. We the first relief was that Apple announced that they postponed this enforcement. It was planned for September with the release of iOS 14. As you know, they move it to early next year. So that was the first, let's say, small victory. And we ask Apple to discuss. That's our request. We say stop it and let's discuss together. We had a first. We start discussion with Apple, with this broader coalition. We agree with Apple to not disclose what we are saying during this discussion, so I will not disclose it. But what you have to understand is we, and when I say we, it's a smaller part of the coalition, decide to, it's a bit broader, but the complainers are in France, decide, as we have no guarantee for Apple at all, that they are going to hold this enforcement, and that the risk is imminent and the damage for the industry is going to be huge. We ask the antitrust authority in France, which is very expert and very flexible, and we file a complaint for antitrust, anti-competitive behavior. So we are asking two things, and I'm going to finish on that, to Apple, to the ADLC, which is the French antitrust authority. The first one is we asking to them we ask them an interim measure. What is an interim measure? It's the power of an antitrust authority to act very quickly in their investigation, and if they feel that there is they could have an competitive behavior, and that the damage are going to be very important and not repairable, they could hold it, ask Apple to not enforce it, and force them to stop it until their investigation is finished. And it can be 1 or 2 years investigation. But they can also force Apple to be at the table for a constructive dialogue. And that's what we are requesting. We just don't want a unilateral decision from Apple. We want them to be at the table and find a common solution. So the next step are waiting for the investigation. It's going to be 1 or 2 years. And then, but before that, before early next year, before March, we're hoping an interim measure from the competitive authorities who could stop and start a real dialogue with Apple. So I'll say it's a plan A, but you have to be prepared, and that's why in responsibility, every company should be obviously try to be ready, because we don't know if it's gonna happen, obviously.
Okay.
And, yeah, and that's it.
Thanks very much, Nicolas. So you will be on the panel right now, starting right now. So we'll be able to cover this a bit more in depth. And now I'm introducing my panelists for this short panel, and we're trying to do the two different, to put the two different spotlights into one perspective. I know that is completely impossible, but we will try our best. So with me are Thomas Mandrina. Thomas is responsible for publisher relationships, so Senior Director Publisher with Xander, and also very active in the IAB Europe universe around TCF. And second of all, Carlo Cielinski. Carlo is CEO of the Apple Group. He will explain in a minute what exactly the Apple Group is doing. From my knowledge, they are an app publisher and an app monetization network at the same time. So they are deeply involved in these kind of topics. And Nicolas already introduced this, is with me on the panel as well. And I suppose that Amit, that maybe there are some questions that only you can answer, and then I will call you, or I will address you directly. So starting with Carlo. First, so did I cover that correctly, what you are doing? So if you could help us in just saying 2 or 3 phrases, what you are doing? And because my understanding is you're quite deep in the Android environment, but also in the iOS environment, and all what you are doing is about identifying the right users and showing them appropriate content and efficiently monetizing through that, mainly for app publishers. So how do you see this IDFA situation? That's the second question. So is it really dramatic for the industry? How do you evaluate that from a perspective of a CEO and also CTO, which you are as well?
Thank you for having me. Really, really cool to be here. Maybe 1-2 words about our different companies. We run 3 of them. There's Just Dice. In Just Dice, we run different apps, and they are all in the mobile loyalty economy. So we run on different mobile loyalty programs, which are mostly the biggest on the planet. And then there's second, the Agile company. It's basically an SKAdnetwork. We have different ad formats, native ad formats, which we distribute to other publishers. And then third, there's Sunday, our game publisher. We build different mobile games, which we distribute all over the globe. And what's really interesting and might be also helpful for the discussion today, we have decided 5-6 years ago to build our own MMP. So we have now 15 developers working on that software. And for us, it was always from the beginning really important to have the attribution part, the analytics part, but also the mobile marketing automation part totally under our control. And that's really helpful because you really know what's going on when something changed on the attribution side. And maybe to jump into the SKAdnetwork topics or the IDFA topics, what's really interesting, from my personal opinion, for the attribution part, the changes by Apple are not really helpful and do not make so much sense. I think they were rushing a lot. They made fast decisions without thinking in detail about what they did there in summer, I think. And what's interesting, in our own MMP, our BI team some days ago, we made a test. We tried to figure out if we would be able to do attribution without the IDFA or without the Google Advertiser ID in the same way, just based on the IP addresses of users. And with that, we could gain a probability or like a success rate of 90%. And when you add that on top some other meta device informations, I would call it fingerprinting, user agents, and other stuff, you can bring it up to 99%. And when you take a look now at the different MMPs, they all will have to move from for iOS to the SKAdnetwork tracking. Nobody says that, but in detail, they still can do the same. They're able to attribute from which ad the app install happens. And they can also do ROI predictions or ROI analysis. And I think what Apple now does, they provide something which is not really in detail thought through, and still everything what they want to do before is possible in the attribution side. But for the targeting and retargeting topics where you need a device identifier to find a user on special ads again, there of course is a dramatic change in the industry.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. I think we will come back to both of the details throughout the discussion. Thank you for the introduction. So Thomas, from your perspective with publishers and also from a business perspective overall, is this there apparently we have one company defining its own rules, right? So and as Nicolas also already indicated, so far, Apple wasn't so deeply interested in developing market standards together with the rest of the industry. So how as a technology provider, do you evaluate this situation, which is created that one company is creating its own rules? Because you are definitely providing technology solutions to all of the channels, and ideally with the same set of standards and tools. So how do you rate that from a business perspective? What is on the table now?
So we really see that our clients are suffering. So I'm responsible for the publishing side, which means the publisher that write content, that produce content mainly on mobile websites, but also in-app. And we see that based on the decision, the value of each impression shrinks significantly for the publisher, which means they generate less revenue via this channel, which means they cannot create as same amount of content, which is really bad for them. And so that's one aspect. In general, there's a reduced value for publisher to write content and to monetize those content. The second aspect is we see an increased segmentation and fragmentation. So there's platform A, platform B, platform C, and there's so many different solutions that as a technology provider you would need to support. That is, you're getting into more like impression types that needs to be evaluated very, very differently, and that's very complex. So the additional fragmentation leads to even more and not a better privacy situation for the user, which means they ask 10 times for 10 different providers, for 10 different platforms. So it's worse for everyone. And we believe as standard that working with the IAB, working also in the project reorg in a more broader scope will help everyone. And I had a conversation 2 days ago with a former chair of the steering group of the TCF, and she said, well, it used to be similarly 3 years ago with the TCF. Nobody believed that it would work out, and no one joined. And then now we see Google joined, Amazon joined. So it's getting stronger, and hopefully we'll see that us working together now also with the in-app, with the app developer coming into the table, we see more dynamics that we can make this work a market standard.
Mm-hmm. And if I can add something
Sure.
on the description, Thomas, you say you can see your client are struggling for monetizing this part here, and I forgot to say why we think Apple could do it on the other perspective, and there is two reasons. We think that if you have less content, less free app, but then publisher will go to a paid model more, where there is a fee, there is a cut from Apple here, so which is at risk. It's also the free content online, which I think most of users are really it's a benefit for most of the people.
Mm. So there was one question in the chat, which is a very good one for our panel, because Nicolas, you explained like plan A and plan B, and definitely a plan A would be to have Apple on the table to develop together standards which are then operable on their platform. The question was like, so do we at all need TCF? If Apple rolls this out as planned, as indicated, you showed the screenshot, definitely no purpose categories in it. You don't need TCF anymore, right? On inside the apps, but on the other hand, in the mobile web, you will need TCF also on iOS devices. How do you see that? So in the end, if Apple comes to the table, then they should accept TCF and join as well, right?
In any case, you will need TCF also, because IDFA is considered as a tracker anywhere for data protection authorities like CNIL in France. They specifically say it in their last guidelines. So Apple consider it's not, they should not request, publisher should not request permission for that, but that's not what the data protection authorities think. So in any case, we will need the transparency and consent framework. in this case. And the real question is the alternative. Because if you have the right to do it, you have the consent from the user with TCF, for example, as a CMP, and could you then find an alternative to IDFA, which is possible? Carlo, you talk about some alternative. We can think about the logging option. You can think about, and REARC is about that. But the guidelines we are reading for now is Apple is not allowing to publisher to offer an alternative to that on the core side, and that's also an issue. They should, if there is a legal basis and user give their consent, we should have the right to find a common ground. That's why we need Apple on the table, and that they understand our needs.
Carlo, let me come back to the app developers and technology alternatives. So app developers, mostly game developers, are your customers, right? So they spend millions of euros every day inside Android and iOS environments to promote their apps, and you take already a good part of it. What do the app developers say right now, which you are talking to? So is it becoming iOS the less relevant platform for them, or do they cry out and try to find like radical solutions by means of registering users by force? Or how is this overall situation regarded in the app economy?
I think at the beginning, everybody was really panicked. You read that on the news and everybody was saying, yeah, this will go crazy. We cannot do that and this. But I think there are two answers to that question. First of all, the attribution part, what I said already in my intro speech, how they know from which campaign, which ad, which creative the user will come and how the ROI is. Currently, from what we see and know, this will not change so much. But what's quite clear, retargeting and using targeting data on programmatic DSPs and so far, that changed a lot. When you have found a user one time again and he's for 6 months inactive, normally many game publishers, they try to reactivate them via retargeting campaigns booked on programmatic, and this won't work anymore if you don't have the access to the IDFA. So this will change a lot. And then I also think for the big platforms like Google and Facebook, they have their audience network. On Google, it's called differently, but they are also depending a lot on those devices to retarget users and find them again. And I think that will change a lot. But for the attribution and ROI optimization and analysis, everybody speaks about it, is super afraid, but we don't see that it really has a big change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a quite rhetoric or maybe provocating question in the chat I see. Is there anyone who can see benefits of that solution? So of the Apple proposal. So very likely Apple sees some benefits, but I'd like to put this in a bit more broader perspective, because it's all about privacy. We are talking about privacy and the user rights and consent all the time, basically. And in this case, this is what you claimed, Nicolas, is that Apple is like utilizing privacy to seek its kind of advantage on their platform to just ignore standards. Is that a danger that in the end we see various privacy solutions on the table, and each technology player who can introduce and force their own standards will do so? How do you regard that? Google confirmed that they are part of TCF and they rolled it out.
So here I think it's a even higher question than privacy. It's about who is the regulator, who is making law, and who should decide. And that's the whole point here. We understand Apple is a global platform, and maybe they don't want to have a very specific approach in every country. European Union or the US, it's not a small region. We're talking about hundreds of millions of citizens. Democratic and with elected government who decide and debate years and years to have GDPR, for example, or privacy, and make something very strict. So that's where, when it comes to privacy, it should not be private. You know, it's not be a private privacy. It should not be owned by any company. It's a fundamental right for everyone, and we should all have the same level of protection. And that's what GDPR is about. And when even on the, I'm going a bit on policy, but there is a discussion, a project of law which called privacy in Europe now, and a regulation. And there is a huge debate about should we put the consent on the browser or app level or OS level, because there is this consent fatigue. So we can understand it can be a very user-friendly way to act. But the thing is, it's giving this to private company, and every company have their own interests, and everyone can understand that. But when it comes to privacy, everyone should be at the same level. So, and it's very controversial. For the moment, it's not going forward for years because one of the not this reason, but a lot of articles having issue, but this one particularly. And even if it was a debate from democratic country, Apple, reaching billion of people, more than 1 billion user in the world, decide unilaterally to take his own decision in his world. So I think that's a higher problem here, which is even the technical issue and the different environment issue, and that's why we should make standard. It's even better for users to have one single way to obviously take care of their privacy and having control. But we can even go higher and philosophically about who is making law and who is the regulator.
Oliver, I can also add to that. In the starting time of the TCF, there was also something like global consent. So there was an idea that if the user gives consent once, then this would be used for all of the different publishers, which is a kind of nice approach, similarly to Apple. But then let's assume you have an Apple phone, then you have one app where you don't like the ad because it's too aggressive, and then you say no. You say no, not for this specific app. You say no to all of the different apps, all of the different publisher, and there's a lot of responsibility then for in this one size fits all privacy screen. So this is why the publisher and together with the IAB decided this is not the right approach. Maybe they should be publisher by publisher and not on a very high level where there are negative side effects that maybe you don't foresee at the moment.
Mm-hmm. There was one very good question referring to Article 6 of GDPR in the chat. Not any single lawyer on our panel, I assume. At least I don't know it. But the question is very, very good, also technology-wise, or how the user flow would be. So GDPR foresees that the consent should be collected by the legal entity running the service from the consumer. And we have, from my understanding, if we would have Apple on the table, they would also potentially claim we are a legal entity, we are running the service iOS, but the publisher would claim, yeah, we run the service app, and this is our service, which we legally own, running on the Apple platform. So if a user has given consent in an app, if I have done that in my favorite game, whether I use TCF or not, let's say in an ideal world, every app publisher uses TCF, and Apple overrides it, or which world can I imagine here? So two consents, or one consent and one no consent. How would that be handled? Any ideas on that?
Basically, Apple has already decided they will override. So,
yeah,
I mean, I'm totally with you. I think the platform in general, so it would be Windows, iOS, or whatever, that should be somehow more open, and all the regulation which should have been placed there should be by the government or by some official regulation, not by a big platform company which rules the world. It doesn't work at the end. And then when the product, the software, is distributed to that platform, which is owned by the developer or by the publisher, then they should also decide or do the opt-in how it's like connected to the law, not like what the platform wants. It's super weird from my understanding.
Yeah, and you know, and that's when you're an app developer or a media or any services, you could say, have the consent, I'm on my right, I'm gonna find another ID. I'm not using IDFA, but I will use something else because I can do it. But then you have Apple who is going to, you have the risk that your app is going to be erased, eject from the App Store, and then you have no service anymore. So that's the issue here. It's because there is this world, and in fact, you could say, yeah, but it's your choice. There is condition, you accept it or you don't accept it. The reality is that there is more than 1 billion iPhone in the world. There is no company who can just say, oh, those customers, I don't want to address them. And as we know, 70% of the internet traffic in the world is now on mobile, and 90% of the time spent is in the app. So that's not something you can avoid. So you don't have the choice. That's why we're talking about antitrust now. If it was a very small company and you have an alternative, but today when you have an iPhone, you have the App Store and you don't have an alternative store. So if you want to reach those people who have the device, you have to go through it. And even if you think it's not acceptable, you don't say anything because you're scared that your app is going to be rejected. That's the issue we have to solve.
In the context of third-party cookies going away, we are always discussing about in the scenarios like what will happen then, right? So is it and very likely this is also discussed inside Project Rearc, which Amit mentioned. So there will be stable identifiers, so logged in users or registered users. They will be unstable identifiers, which go away, for example, if you close the browser or the app. And there are no identifiers. So a world where the user is technically invisible for certain things. And for other things, you can use SKAdnetwork for attribution purposes. Carlo, what do you think how the world will then look like, right? So is it the invisible Apple user versus the completely transparent Android user, or is it it's just Apple playing a very large guinea pig here and Google will follow, and if Apple goes through?
Difficult to answer that in one sentence. I think there are many steps. I think it will take some time, so it will not come immediately. I think it will change, but not that you recognize it directly. There are different ways how it changed. So first, maybe attribution does not change so much, but the way how to retargeting, whatever I mentioned before. But in general, when I take a look at Google, I would expect that they maybe follow somehow, but they will do it, I think, in a little bit smarter way. Also, how they provide an interface, an API, how you can do the tracking in the end, the attribution part, because as I said before, that was really like rushed and fast, and there was not maybe put so much thoughts into it. But in general, I think the mobile marketing economy goes more in the direction that you then target more audience or interest of people. So you don't have that specific targeting on I want to have this guy called or named Peter. It's more like that you take a look what kind of audience people are behaving in, what kind of other stuff they recognize or consume, and then you target those campaigns much more. I think that's the future in that regard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are almost on the hour, and I'd like to have one phrase statement. Typically, moderators ask for that. So if we would meet again, maybe we can also include Amit. He's still there on technically as a panelist. If we would meet again in 4 months, let's say at 1st of April next year, what do we see on the iOS platform? Thomas, the invisible user, or is it will this storm go away and be postponed again?
We'll see the invisible user, but then thinking about joining TCF 4.0, hopefully.
4, okay. I'd love to know what's in 3 then before that. Okay, Carlo.
The principle how it currently is will stay, but the SKAdnetwork will improve.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Nicolas?
I invite you to check a new Forrester report which just been released today, which is named the Europe Digital Space Renaissance Start Now. Sorry, I'm talking about with the European hat, but that's the case here. And is specifically talk about all this antitrust part and regulation as well as a starting point. And I feel, and because I'm an optimistic, that can be this case, talking about the complaint again, it's key, because it's gonna it could stop basically whole kind of this kind of behavior on the market, and then have more discussion in the ecosystem to find things. So to answer your question, 1st of April, I don't see any enforcement from this pop-up, because that's what we are requesting, and I think we have very good ground or legal basis to say that it's an anti-competitive behavior.
I think that probably very similar to what everyone else has been saying. I do think that the SKAdnetwork's part is most likely going to be implemented and enforced. The rest of it, I think that Apple has definitely shown that they are aware of the fact that these changes are a cause for concern. I mean, this is probably the first time I've seen them delay something also, for that matter. So I think they're definitely seeing that. But I really have no idea how this entire thing is going to play out from a regulatory point of view, I guess. Okay.
Good, that was great. Thank you. We were trying to cover a lot in this hour. I hope for the audience that this was productive for you. Well, you can't say anything, but I see, at least I see a lot of people still online. Thanks very much. Thanks to my panelists, Thomas, Nicola, Amit, and Carlo, and hope to see you soon around. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. We will be uploading the recording of this webinar tomorrow onto IAB Europe's website. Thank you so much to all of our panelists and for staying an extra couple of minutes. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Thank you, Eden. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.